Hi there! Today, I'm going to show you how I edit my photographs taken from a mobile phone using Google's application Snapseed. We'll work on this street photo that I captured while traveling through Hampi in India and end up with a result that looks really professional, like one that's come from a DSLR and edited on a computer application like Lightroom. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with that street photo that I took from India. So let's begin by opening up the tools from the menu. And as we can see, there's a bunch of cool features that Snapseed provides, which range from general filters that you can apply to an image to photo correction and even some fine-tuning that you can do, such as selective features in the brush. So I'm going to run you through the ones that I use most often. I generally start by entering the crop menu and seeing if there's something that can be done with the general framing of the photograph and if it can be enhanced through editing. What we can observe here is that it's a very symmetric composition and we have two walls on either side. The focal point is definitely the lady walking down the street, so we could try to enhance her a little bit. If you notice, there's a roof at the top which we're going to crop into and just leave some borders around there. Within this arrangement, the lady is perfectly framed within the rule of thirds, which is also great for framing subjects within a photo in general. Now that we have that, let's get back into the tools, and the next thing I'm going to do is open up the tune image in the top left. So these are the general adjustments like brightness, contrast. So let's get right into it. With the brightness, yeah, it could be a bit brighter just to let the image pop out a little more. So I'm gonna take that up to 15. Let's move on to the contrast. At this point, the contrast seems okay. For the saturation, I think we could probably bring back, let's bring back the colors a bit, because there's some great color happening toward the bottom right in the moss on the wall, and there's that beautiful house right at the back of the photo where you can see, the patterns and the lines which are gorgeous, and we want to really enhance those parts of this photograph. Another feature that we could highlight are those red bricks to the left, which really bring out the character of the village. So the ambiance brings back some of the detail in the image. When we pull it down, we get a result where it gets less dynamic, and when we pull it up, it brings back color and dynamic range within all parts of the image. For this image, I'd probably leave it around 50. For the highlights, I'm going to turn it down a little bit to bring back some of the details from the clouds. And same for the shadows. I personally like my shadows deep, so I'm going to darken the shadows a little bit, maybe take it to about 15. And for warmth, at this point it actually seems okay, so I'm just going to let that be as it is. So we're done tuning the image, and we can now move on to the next step, which could be the white balance. So I think the camera did a pretty decent job getting the white balance right on this one, so we're going to leave that as it is. Moving on to one of my favorite tools within the Snapseed toolkit is the HDRscape. What the HDRscape does is it increases the dynamic range, so it brings back details from the shadows and the highlights within an image to create this greater contrast and just bring back a lot more detail. With this image, we're probably gonna turn it up a little bit and maybe leave it around 15. The brightness seems alright, but it does seem a tad bit up, and we could probably bring back some detail by turning it down a notch. So let's take it down by about 10 points and definitely turn down the saturation, which is actually something that HDR applies by itself. When you apply this filter, it automatically just takes your colors up a notch. So I think we can tone that back a bit as well. If you tap the photo within the Snapseed editor, you can see what it looked like before and what it looks like now when you release your finger, and we've come a long way. It's definitely brought back a lot. We've brought back a lot of detail. We've brought back some color, but at this point, it definitely looks a bit too vibrant and lacks a little bit of an emotional style, which is what we're going to get into next by adding a grainy film. This by far is my favorite feature within the program. So let's play around with this a bit. So as you can see, Snapseed has a ton of grainy film filters ranging from A to X, but for this one, let's go with L02. It really has a nice style that creates the mood that I was looking for in my mind before we began this photograph. Let's turn down the grain to about 10 because that leaves the effect without making it too noisy and grainy. And within the style strength, so that's at 0, that's what it looks like at 100. Let's stay around 50 for this photograph because it leaves the realism of the photograph while adding a bit of that flavor. Let's enhance some of those features that we pointed out at the start of this video, such as the bricks and the moss. So open up the tools menu and click on details. Let's turn up the structure a little bit to about, 25 looks good for this one. It's not too much. If you go too far, it starts looking a bit plasticky, and that's not a result that looks very appealing personally. So I'm going to leave that at about 25. And for the sharpening, I'm just going to turn that up to 5 to make things a little more clear. At this point, I'm pretty happy with how the photos turned out overall, but there's still a few things that we can do to make it look truly amazing. So we can open up the healing dialog box and okay, so as you can see within this image, there's something weird hanging from the roof up there, from the thatched roof, and it doesn't add to the image at all. So I like to take a few of those things out because what doesn't add to a photo is taking away from it. So let's just zoom in and rub a bit on that. Oh, Snapseed did a bad job there, which we can kind of touch up again. Just cleans that up. Yeah, that looks pretty okay. And any other points? Let's see, there's something there. I mean, the idea with this is just to get unnecessary elements out of the photo. This looks pretty good now, but I want to bring a little more dynamic range, for which I'm going to open up the curves menu and pull up the luminance control here, which would control the lighting within the photograph. Okay, so general rule of thumb about curves. Toward the top it's the highlights and toward the bottom it's the shadows. So, and in between is where the midtones lie. Let's take the highlights and pull them down a little bit because we currently see that, for example, on her back, you can see that the highlights are very strong. We can pull back on some of that. Now I'm going to go to the bottom of the curves to pull back on the shadows a tad bit and make it darker because that just increases the overall contrast, and for this image it works pretty well. And in the middle I'm going to take the midtones slightly higher. Actually I'm going to turn down the shadows a little bit because they seem a bit too dark. Ew. Okay, so we're nearly done. Last step for today is we're going to add a vignette to this image and bring attention to the central area, which is the focus for this image. So let's go into our menu and pull up the vignette. Let's first set our radius, which I think, 40 should be pretty good. So there's an inner and outer brightness command. We're going to play with the outer brightness and turn it down so that we can bring in some darkness toward the edges. As you can see, this can be taken all the way, which does not look very aesthetic. So let's leave that around 56 and boom, that's it for today. We've started with what was a decent photograph from a mobile phone camera and ended up with something that looks a lot more professional. I recommend you to go out there, take some amazing photographs and enhance them within Snapseed. So what kind of photo would you like me to work on next? Leave your answers, queries and suggestions in the comment section below. And do leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thanks a lot.